Fox News alert. As Putin closes in on Kyiv and more reports come in of his forces indiscriminately targeting civilians, President Biden is now taking new actions on Russia as critics question his leadership. Hello, everyone. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, and this is Outnumbered. Here with me today, my co-host, Emily Compagno, and Fox & Friends first co-host, Carly Shimkus. Also joining us, Cassie Smedley and Pete Hegseth. President Biden, a short time ago at the White House, announced that the United States will dramatically downgrade its trade status with Russia as punishment for Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and will also ban imports of Russian seafood, alcohol, and diamonds. The broad trade shift, which revokes the most favored nation status for Russia, is being taken in coordination with the European Union and a group of 7 other countries. And as he was walking off, the president was pressed about his administration's warning that Russia may be prepared to use chemical weapons.
Your White House has said that Russia may use chemical weapons or create a false flag operation to use them. What evidence have you seen showing that? And would the U.S. have a military response if Putin does launch a chemical weapons attack?
I'm not going to speak about the intelligence, but Russia would pay a severe price if they use chemical weapons.
Would the U.S. send troops in?
Russia will pay a severe price. Well, let's take a walk down memory lane. Let's flash back to January during President Biden's press conference.
It's one thing if it's a minor incursion.
Pete.
Yeah, Kayleigh, we're seeing a lot more than a minor incursion, which was, as you just showed, effectively blessed off on by this White House. And you watched that press conference, and from the beginning, and underlying all of this, is the Kremlin does not see strength at all. They see American weakness. They see predictability. They see tepidness, and they've taken advantage of that. And that's why those of us who want to see Vladimir Putin absolutely crushed in Ukraine also are pretty constrained about what we would want his involvement to be directly, because I don't know how confident I am in the competence of the same administration that brought us the debacle in Afghanistan, from the State Department to the Defense Department and elsewhere. So blocking more sanctions, taking away most favored status, good. What Ukraine needs is stingers and javelins and support, but also with an eye toward the fact that America has no interest in a broader conflict here, in triggering Article 5, in seeing an escalation. That's not good for American interests, and effectively would give an excuse to Vladimir Putin to widen it. So there's no clear off-ramp for him. He's digging in, and if it were to come to chemical weapons, I don't know what we do. I certainly don't think it means we trigger some red line and get involved all the way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. You know, Emily, you and I have talked a lot about peace through strength. And when you have a strong leader, it engenders peace. We saw it with Reagan. We saw it with President Trump, where he had 4 years with no Russia invasions. And I just want to reset our memory to 6 weeks ago. It's easy to get lost in what we're seeing, these horrific images, and forget the context and the lead up to this moment. Let's take a listen to what the media was saying, broad stroke, about President Biden back on January 20th.
Officials in this country and very likely in Russia tonight are wondering, did President Biden just give Vladimir Putin a green light to launch an invasion into or around them?
I mean, to say, Erin, that they were displeased when they heard those comments would be an understatement. One of the officials that I spoke to said that he was shocked when he heard President Biden draw a distinction between an incursion and an invasion.
Russia's going to pounce on that phrase during diplomatic talks.
We're already seeing the cleanup. I'm already seeing in my text exchanges with people around the president, cleanup on aisle State Department.
Emily, Russia has pounced.
Right. I think what this underscores to me is the notion of inevitability, that critical mass time was actually 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 18 months ago, that the deterrence factor there was so crucial, and that is what slipped away from this Biden administration. Those are those crucial moments that were lost that led to the inevitability of frankly, Ukrainian death. And if I may, I have actually a question for Hegseth, really briefly, which is one of, when you mentioned, Pete, the notion of of Putin's perception of escalation. My specific question is, short of our administration levying these kind of sanctions while on the sly engaging in covert ops to diminish this threat, short of that scenario, what does it matter what we do if it's all in his perception anyway? What does it matter the levels of our, whether it's MiGs or javelins, if no matter what it is in Putin's brain, whether he deems it as an escalation, because isn't the primary consideration now to neutralize that threat so that it doesn't get to chemical or nuclear, regardless of false flag?
It's the key question, and it's a great question. And ultimately, Vladimir Putin's calculation is going to be based on his ambitions, and only he knows that. And escalate. This is not about being afraid of Vladimir Putin or letting Vladimir Putin set the terms of this. And this is callous. It's going to sound callous, but this is about keeping it contained to Ukraine and helping the Ukrainians repel an illegal invasion and not dragging us in further. And history isn't always helpful here. I mean, communists gave weapons directly to the North Vietnamese in Vietnam, yet that didn't lead to further escalation necessarily from us. So there is precedent for directly supporting the foes of your foe. In this case, he's already using fake excuses to go further. There's also complications with MiGs and supplying them, and where do they go, and could they go inside Russia? And there's just a lot more complications. So it's all arbitrary. To your point, Emily, is it missiles? Is it tanks? Is it planes? I mean, what point does he? We may not know what that is, but ultimately, we want to hurt him and bleed him enough that he's not able to control Ukraine, but has no desire to broaden it as well. That's my view. These are all imperfect calculations.
Carly, and as we look at these images, I think it's important to call things what they are, and an attack on a maternity ward is a war crime. I want to flash back. This is prior to that attack, but we knew for certain that Putin was targeting innocent civilians. And there was this odd kind of juxtaposition of remarks on March 2nd, where you had the UN ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, say, essentially, these are war crimes. She at least described them in that term. President Biden not willing to say that just yet. Let's play that soundbite.
Do you believe Russia is committing war crimes?
We are following very closely. It's early to say that.
We've seen videos of Russian forces moving exceptionally lethal weaponry into Ukraine, which has no place on the battlefield. That includes cluster munitions and vacuum bombs, which are banned under the Geneva Convention.
So there was a little bit of a disparity there in what they said. Carly, interestingly, on that very day, March 3rd, the day after, if you went on to find that official transcript of her UN remarks, she crossed out, they crossed out that remark that seemed to be at odds with the president. They've since changed that since we mentioned it on Outnumbered. But now she's saying today, wow. Yeah, it was very interesting to watch. She's saying today they constitute war crimes. Vice President Harris essentially calling it war crimes as well. They finally got here, but why did it take so long?
I mean, it is obvious that war crimes are taking place before our very eyes, and the concern is that they could get worse. I personally am less interested in this war crimes conversation than others because it's just symbolic. I mean, you're never going to get Vladimir Putin out of Russia. This is more symbolic than anything else. I mean, you can have these investigations, but how do you hold him? How do you hold his generals accountable when they are clearly focused on destroying the Ukrainian people? Biden not calling these things war crimes is something that I thought was odd at the time because it was so clear that they were. Other people say that that was sort of a calculated decision by him because he didn't want to escalate the situation. And that really has been his MO, not escalating the situation, I think, to a fault. And also, Europe has really taken the lead here. It does feel like America has become the junior partner in this situation. And I know that this is a war in Europe, but we are the leaders of the free world. And I think we do have a responsibility to take the lead and make those difficult decisions. So, yeah, I say yes to the MiGs. If Vladimir Zelensky wants them, and we're talking about 29 planes that could help him, then why not? He has an Air Force now, but that could change in a week. And I also don't understand why we're having this MiG conversation in public to begin with. It does feel like something that these countries should be doing behind closed doors. We're in the media. We like a lot of information, but I'd rather not know about these MiGs than be reporting on the fact that Ukraine doesn't have them.
Yeah, and Cassie, Carly makes the key point. Why are we broadcasting our strategy? I mean, President Biden's like a bad poker player where you see every one of his expressions. You know exactly the hand he is holding. No, we won't send U.S. troops. I agree, we shouldn't. But why tell Russia that? No, we won't sanction you in advance of an invasion. Why tell Russia that? The MiGs, why tell Russia that? Why are you doing this, President Biden?
Right. You know who's watching him the closest? Vladimir Putin, who's saying, oh, well, they're not going to do anything to me on this, so I'm going to go forth. And this whole idea of we don't want to escalate the situation to add more volatility to the region, isn't that exactly what he's doing by not doing anything? There has to be a happy medium between taking the lead and leading from behind. And I agree with the panel on the complexity of the situation. It's much more complex than meets the average eye. But I just would like to insert a little bit of polling here. There's a poll out today from Navigator Research. 49% of Americans say that Biden is failing on this issue, among others, of course. So if he won't just look at the situation to see what can be done, at least listen to the American people who are saying, whether from a humanitarian perspective or at the risk of escalating volatility around the world, not just in this immediate region, do something. There has to be something more that we can do, because right now, as the panel has said, we look weak, and that's not a position that America or Americans ever want to be in.
Yeah, I think too little too late has been the name of the game, unfortunately.